living on the east side of Portland with his wife Sharon. They have 3 children and 2 grandsons, and they all like each other, which is one sign of success in life. John enjoys auditing classes at PSU, riding his e-bike, singing in choirs, and meeting up with friends for a beer or coffee. And as he approaches a milestone birthday this month, he has drawn together his thoughts about the life, the universe, and everything to share with us. And because John does have his milestone birthday later this month, we want to take a moment and sing happy birthday to him. And we're doing the special version we enjoy doing at Eastrose, which is to the tune of the Merry Widow Waltz. And say hello. There will be more time to chat during coffee time after the service today. For our online guests, if you'd like to share a joy or a sorrow during that portion of the service, you can do so by entering it into the YouTube chat. And those will be shared aloud with everyone. And I also encourage you to identify yourself in the chat so we may better acknowledge your presence with us today. Our call to worship words are from Gary Kozwalski. We gather here to worship, to seek the truth, to grow in love, to join in service, to celebrate life's beauty and find healing for its pain, to honor our kinship with each other and with the earth, to create a more compassionate world, beginning with ourselves, to wonder at the mystery that gave us birth, to find courage for the journey's end, and to listen for the wisdom that guides us in the quietness of the moment. In this mystery of life about us, there is light. It gives us a place to be, to grow, to rejoice together. It opens the pathway to love. In this place of friendship, there is freedom. Let the light we kindle go before us, strong in hope, wide in goodwill, inviting the day to come.
The placing of candles upon a circle of evergreens is an age-old, has been part of human rituals for centuries upon centuries, and brilliant lengthening. We light candles each week with anticipation, as we know a new season will soon be here. day is warmth of the sun. This is week 1 of Advent, and the first Advent candle is the candle of hope. The days are getting shorter, the weather colder, and the nights longer. Hope tells us that longer days are ahead, that new life will emerge, and that we need to hold on just a little longer. With hope, we begin our journey toward the sun and the new life it brings. So we light today the candle of hope. And now our opening words are from Diana Eck, a religion scholar at Harvard, in the context of relating the way that Hinduism often sees its many images of gods as the many faces of God, to the way the Christian and religious calendar presents the faces of Christ. And Eck begins with Advent, of which today is the first Sunday, and the beginning of the Christian calendar. Today we have lighted the candle of hope in our wreath. And as I read Eck's words last week, I couldn't avoid thinking of our current feelings about our situation after the recent election and the hopes and fears that we might bring about that. Eck says, in the season of Advent, Christians focus on the not yet, the face of expectation. The angel announced to Mary, "You will conceive." And Mary was troubled, and she waited. And yearly we recognize in Advent that there are many seasons when God's presence is not yet. All we can do is prepare and hope. In a world where tragedies, catastrophes, and violence greet us with each morning's headlines, we have to practice and refine our human capacity for such expectant and wakeful hope. Eck then tells the story of her friend Ken, who said to her, "This year's Advent really comes at the right time. I found myself in church this morning very troubled and pessimistic about the world. At first, I felt this entry into a season of hope was a bit of going through the motions, but I find myself convinced that the motions are most needed at just such a moment. Otherwise, I would simply give up." The Advent season is no panacea, but these eternal motions of Advent's hope did begin to work on me. And Eck concludes, the simple rites of Advent refine our capacity to wait in expectation with the mystery of anticipation. A candle is lit, then 2 candles, 3, 4. May these simple rites of Advent guide you in this troubled time. Now we have an opening hymn, and Mary and I are going to do a little special treatment to it because you may or may not have noticed, but she's picking a bunch of things from the Welsh tradition. Connection there, because I used to preach at the Welsh church. And after I stopped doing that, Mary started playing for the services every month. And so when she's not here playing for you, she's often at the Welsh church. So we're going to do O Come, Emmanuel. You have it in your, well, it'll be on the screen. It says what we're doing, and I don't need to repeat all that. A verse in Welsh, and then you take it over.
O Tara Good morning. It's nice to have you all here. Come have a seat.
Seven kids.
Wonderful. As Unitarian Universalists, we believe in the worth and dignity of every person, and that means that every single one of us has a voice that is uniquely our own, and thoughts and perspectives no one else shares in quite the same way. No one else in the whole world can see things exactly as you do or speak up exactly as you do. And that's what makes your voice and your viewpoint so important. We might sometimes think we're too small to make much of a difference, but history shows that the most powerful changes often start with just one person speaking up for what they believe is right. Today's story is called Speak Up. It shows how your voice and your understanding of the world have the power to help create the beloved community we dream of. So speak up. We should be quiet. There are days for letting go. But when matters seem important, speak up. Let others know. With so many ways to speak up, like a sign, a smile, a shout, if we could make things better, why not let our words come out? When you're being introduced and they get your name all wrong, speak up, say your name. You are you and you belong. When someone spreads a rumor and you're sure it isn't true, speak up, state the facts. Truth can open up our view. When a rule just isn't fair or has gotten much too old, speak up, work for change. Justice comes when we are bold. When a person wounds another with their words or with their fist, speak up, be an ally. Safety comes when we persist. If you see someone who's lonely or they're having a bad day, speak up, share a moment. Kindness goes a long, long way. When you make a small mistake, even if you didn't know, speak up, say you're sorry, learn to listen, learn to grow. When you have a special day or you're given something neat, speak up, shout your thanks. Gratitude makes life so sweet. When you're sad feelings and the world seems dark and gray, speak up, ask for help. Friendship chases clouds away. When trees and creatures suffer from our quick and careless choices, speak up, rally others. Nature needs our mindful voices. When you know a scary secret about someone getting hurt, speak up, tell a grown-up. Courage sometimes means you blurt. When the group is taking one path, but you know it's not the way, speak up, change directions. Leaders.
And I'll now invite you into a quiet time in the service. And if you're comfortable, close your eyes. Place your feet on the floor, uncross your arms, drop your shoulders, and take a very big exhale. Then begin your intentional breathing. 4 beats slowly through your nose, 5 or 6 beats out through your mouth in a steady rhythm, creating spaciousness as you move from the crown of your head to the soles of your feet, grounded on the earth. Complete another round or two of breathing, and then slowly come back to this space. And please remain seated and sing our quiet song. It's number 224 in the gray hymnal, Let Christmas Come, or the words will also be on the screen.
Still they would not know. But by searching, humans in the course of time find things out better. Then after dismissing the traditional ideas about the gods, Xenophanes also says this: God is one, and not like mortals in body or in mind. For without effort, God sets things in motion, all things, by mind and thought. These things have seemed to me to resemble the truth. Then we fast forward 100 years or so to Socrates. And this is in the year 399 BCE. We know that because we can date the year of his death. And he says this to his friend Crito as they waited in prison for Socrates' execution. So after Crito has argued to Socrates that he should let him, Crito, help him to escape. And Socrates says this: not only now, but always, I am the kind of man who is persuaded by nothing except the argument that on reflection seems best to me. I am not able now to throw out those arguments I used before just because this misfortune has come upon me, for they seem pretty much the same to me, and I honor and value these arguments, even as before. So, unless we are able to produce better arguments right now, you can be sure that I will not agree with you. Now we fast forward again, it's a few centuries, to the Roman philosopher Cicero in about the year 45 BCE, talking about what I'm going to talk a little about later, a philosophy called academic skepticism. It is our practice as academic skeptics to say what we think because we want to discover truth without any contention, and we search for it conscientiously and enthusiastically. To be sure, knowledge is always surrounded with difficulties, and the obscurity of the things themselves and the weaknesses of our judgments is such that one can see why the earliest and most learned philosophers lost confidence in their ability to discover what they desired. Still, they didn't give up, and we won't abandon our enthusiasm for investigation, nor do our arguments have any purpose other than to draw out the truth, or its closest possible approximation by means of arguing on either side. But then finally, we come into the modern era with a Scottish philosopher named David Hume. This little chapter is of his Inquiry Concerning Human Understanding in the year 1748 of the Common Era. This is what Hume says. It may seem that radical or extreme skepticism is a very extravagant attempt of the skeptics to destroy reason by argument and ratiocination, yet this is the grand scope of all their inquiries and disputes. However, there is a more mitigated skepticism or academical philosophy, which may be both durable and useful when excessive skepticism is corrected by common sense and reflection. Whew. Here ends the readings. Are you glad? Okay. We do a musical interlude, and this is to aid your reflection, except that I'm going to sing something Welsh with Mary's help. This is called Siogan. It's a lullaby, and it's often sung at Advent Christmas time. So there'll be a verse, and then an English one that makes it more applicable to Christmas. Me say that I don't consider myself a theologian, or that I have little patience for theology. What I would aspire to be, rather, is a philosopher who finds himself a Christian, rather than a theologian. So what's the difference? I'm so glad you asked. Like a philosopher, a theologian tries to think things through at the highest level, but always in the service of the faith community for their own religious tradition. The philosopher, however, seeks to speak to all comers, appealing only to the demands of common reason. So I'm starting with the strand of philosophy that I most identify with, at least this week. And yes, that's Western philosophy, starting with the ancient Greeks and Romans, and then developing in Europe mainly. And those four philosophers I quoted, Xenophanes, Socrates, Cicero, and Hume, are indeed among my philosophical heroes. And for me, Cicero and Hume especially stand for the academic skepticism that is indeed the school of philosophy that I mostly agree with. Xenophanes and Socrates are great initiators to the basic attitude: don't expect some kind of superhuman perfection. Keep searching and investigating, thinking critically, and you'll improve your understanding. And as I look back on my 20 years of teaching at Mount Hood Community College in philosophy, 10 years before that at Clackamas Community College, I found it natural to do just the sort of thing Cicero does in his writings. First, pose a question. Then, discuss the views of the various schools of his day, the Stoics, the Epicureans, the skeptics, and then maybe we'll be ready to draw our own conclusions after all that. Teaching philosophy in the community colleges often involves looking at the classic thinkers and contrasting those with contrasting views, Socrates and Plato, Descartes and Hume, Kant and Mill, and then trying to get the students to think through for themselves, figuring out the most probable answers. And with any luck along the way, the student might come away with an experience of what it is to do philosophy. And the hope is, as Xenophanes said, that by searching, humans in the course of time find things out better. And with Cicero, the point is to find the truth, or its closest possible approximation, by means of arguing on either side. This drives some people crazy. But one thing I really think is that the kind of skepticism of Cicero and Hume, they call it a mitigated skepticism, meaning it doesn't reject all beliefs. It doesn't despair about finding truth. That's where I find myself. This kind of skepticism was called academic skepticism in the ancient world, and by Hume in the modern period, allows for believing whatever you judge the most probable, after examining something sufficiently well to make that judgment reasonable. For instance, it's still debated among scholars of David Hume, the last one we read, whether he ultimately did or did not believe in God. I think he most likely did not. But for me, I do believe that God is real, though it's still not clear how to define God exactly. For me, there's a kind of spectrum from the God of the Bible through the God of Western philosophical theism. Talk about that in a minute. I'll call it ethical monotheism, right? To the God of the Hindu Vedanta and more. I just think we know a lot less about all that than we need to make a reasonable guess. So that's the gist of what I really think about philosophy, skepticism, and how it applies to God. But to think more specifically about matters of religion, let me try to clarify another cluster of terms that I'll use in my own peculiar way. And again, there will not be a quiz later, but do listen up now for a moment. First, there's a cluster of words around the words skeptic and skepticism, which are about claiming to know something. Specifically, let's take the case of knowing something about God, which gives a different meaning to skepticism from what I was just saying. In this context, a skeptic might be a person who says, I don't know whether there's a God or not, but I'm open to the possibility that you might know, and you might persuade me. Then there's the agnostic, who says, knowledge about God is impossible. So I don't know if there's a God, and neither do you, because that kind of knowledge is not available to humans. And finally, there's the atheist. In contrast to both of those, says, there is no God. God is not real. So of course no one knows there's a God, and if someone thinks there is such a thing as God, they're simply wrong. So I take skeptic, agnostic, and atheist to be distinct ideas, different from one another. But a few years ago, when I was part of a theists panel in a credo service here at Eastrose, there was an atheists panel, which I also attended at that time. I don't know if any of you remember that. But I remember thinking at the time, these people who say they are atheists, what they're really talking about is being skeptics. I conclude that we're just not using the words in the same way. I also thought, well, I've known Presbyterian churches, the people in Presbyterian churches who describe themselves in much the same way. But what's acceptable to say in today's liberal Presbyterian church culture is, I have doubts, not I'm an atheist. So in this context, skepticism means a way of rejecting or losing a belief, a way of unbelief. But that's different from the ancient sense of academic skepticism, which I identify with. The academic skeptic can be a believer or an unbeliever, depending what they think, after considering all the evidence and, the arguments and such for and against. So me, I turn out to be what I'd call an ethical monotheist. That's not bragging about being ethical. Don't lay that on me, but it means that you believe in one God and it has an ethical upshot. God wants you to do and be a certain kind of person. So going back to that credo service from a few years ago, where I got to be part of the theists panel, right? It was clear to me that Eastrose is a place where I get to be the conservative. I thought I took a pretty minimalist approach. That is, I wasn't proclaiming Christianity in particular, but just, even though I'm a Christian minister, I just tried to say what it meant to be a theist, right? In a way that's in the mainstream of what we call the Abrahamic religions. You know that term? This means Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all give honor to the ancestor of Abraham, right? And I did then and do now hold a pretty traditional way, I guess, of understanding God, all those omni words that we all learn sometime or other, omnipotent, omniscient, and all that, and that God is personal, embraces us all in what one of my minister friends calls the big love, and that God cares about justice, in particular, in the human community. This is the view that I prefer to call ethical monotheism. Now, I understand this God, this idea of God, was worked out by a dialogue among Jewish, Christian, and Muslim philosophers and theologians in a long period of history called the medieval period. So it's the God of medieval philosophy. Jewish, Christian, and Muslim. But that turned out to be rather unusual here at Eastrose. Even among the theists panel, I was by far the most traditional. So I just want to state for the record that that's an unusual place for me to be. I'm much more likely to be a borderline heretic in the places where I usually hang out. I can tell that you find that reassuring. So let me try to make some sense out of another cluster of terms around heretic and heretical. These words are part of a different context, being part of a religion or a religious community. A heretic is a part of the community who does not conform to what is considered traditional or normal, or acceptable even by most people, or especially the authorities. They have that sort of thing in a religious community, but it continues to identify with the community nonetheless. If I'm a heretic, I might think the community should change its mind and agree with me. Another contrasting term, may or not be so familiar with, is the word apostate. An apostate is a former member of the religious community who has renounced that community or its core beliefs, or has been kicked out. Kicked out farther than they kick out heretics, into another religion, right? And an Orthodox member of the religious community contrasts with that as one who does conform and so on, acceptable in the community or by its authorities. Now, these terms are vague enough that there's a lot of controversy when you go to apply them. When there's a split in a religious body, for instance, take Catholic and Protestant, which side is the heretical one, and which is the Orthodox Well, they argue about that too, you might imagine. But enough of that, back to me. Let me try to give you the whole picture as best I can. Ethical monotheism, I believe, was the typical faith of the founders of both the Unitarian and the Universalist traditions in America. So right around the year 1800, y'all would have agreed with me. You moved on from there. But it originates within Judaism between maybe 600 and 500 BCE among the classic prophets and priests of ancient Israel. It later becomes part of the core faith of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and finds expression as well in parts of Hinduism, Buddhism, and ancient Chinese religion, and even within forms of paganism. But within Christianity, I would specify what I think a little farther. I have a what's called a low Christology, which means to begin with what's most likely to be true about the historical Jesus and the earliest history of what comes to be called Christianity. I have great respect for the earliest followers of Jesus, including the historical Paul and the communities that produced the first three Gospels of the New Testament. I don't know if you know that, but Matthew, Mark, Luke. And with claims about a divine nature of Jesus, I choose to exercise my academic skepticism. Same with things like the Trinity and the Incarnation and the resurrection. I just think we know a lot less about those things than we need to. And I'm part of the Western Church, and within that, the Protestant side. Within Protestantism, I'm Reformed tradition, which is also called Calvinism by the uninitiated. And within that, the Presbyterian Church USA is my denomination. The modernist and liberal side of that, if not radical, perhaps even heretical. But don't report me to the presbytery, please. When I was teaching at Clackamas Community College, a colleague who was in fact a UU once referred to the famous local scholar Marcus Borg as proclaiming a Christianity for those with the gift of skepticism. And at the time, I didn't quite get what she meant. But now, at this time, I embrace my own basic skepticism. I begin to get it. That's all I've got for today. I have to get back and find out where we are in the liturgy. I think it's, we're going to sing a closing hymn. Turn the world around. Let's see. I don't think I need this book anymore. I think I'm going to play the conga drum. That's one of the things that I like to do here. If I get to play percussion a little bit and, you know, sing something in Welsh. Let's see. We got the number up on the screen? Yeah. It's not in Welsh, so take heart.
Shall we stand?
I think, yeah. I can stand and dance.
Fire,
Thank you. That was a real treat hearing you play the bongos. Each week, we at Eastrose take an offering to support this church and to share with a community nonprofit. We have a change in that after discussion and deliberation, our Eastrose Board of Directors voted to extend our Sharing the Bounty partnership with NAYA, which stands for the American Youth and Family Center, for a longer period until August 31st of next year. This is a pilot program with the goal of developing a deeper relationship and more interactions with this organization. You can contact Karen Pyle with any ideas you have from our time with Tamara Henderson, the Chief Operating Officer of NAYA, who visited us early in November at a service time. NAYA serves self-identified Native Americans, infant to elder, from across the Portland metro area. Their aim is to enhance the diverse strengths of youth and families in partnership with the community through cultural identity and education. They believe that traditional cultural values are integral to regaining sovereignty and building self-esteem. NAYA values respect for the environment, places the larger community before the individual, and involves elders. They promote healthy living through positive alternatives to high-risk behaviors and promote the values of society, family stability, cultural, active lifestyles, and education. And Karen just stepped in if you don't know who she is. So she's the one you can with them. And if you're attending online, donate by visiting our website and clicking the donate button, or you can scan the QR code on the screen. And if you are here for the first time, we invite you to be our guest and let the basket pass. The gifts of the congregation will now be most gratefully received. Please remain seated and sing our song of gratitude, number 1010 in the Teal hymnal, and the words will be on the screen. And we'll now extinguish the chalice with these words. John, are you able to extinguish? Thank you very much. Be kind, be brave, be just, be merciful, be hopeful. This is how we keep the chalice flame burning until we are together again to light it anew. but if you are interested, it will be the Gresham Butte Saddle Hike, and Wednesday at 9:30, meeting at the trailhead. If you are interested, see me after the service. Tuesday, there will be lunch with the minister at noon, if you can come here and enjoy some community with others and the minister. And Reverend Robin will be back in the pulpit again next Sunday. And of course, there are many other announcements. Please see your Petals newsletter for those. If you don't get the newsletter, you can sign up in the office for that. Okay.
So traditionally, a benediction, first of all, is not a prayer, so don't you close your eyes and bow your heads, okay? Up here. The charge comes, that's two parts, a charge and a blessing, okay? So here's the charge. Comes from my 17 commandments of Socrates, which I totally made up for a sermon here 6 years ago. I made them up. Socrates himself never says things like thou shalt, okay? But it's a church, so I used that. Thou shalt, number one, this is number one, thou shalt be humble about what you think you know. 3, thou shalt strive always to be clear-headed, logical, and self-critical about your own beliefs. 5, indeed, thou shalt love logic, argument, and the critical process. 7, thou shalt always cultivate your own curiosity, following the argument wherever it leads, aspiring to increase and improve your own realistic understanding of yourself, of others, and of the best way to live. Did you all get that down? Okay. 9, thou shalt always actively aspire to be a morally and intellectually better person. Now the blessing. May you always have the courage to seek and follow your best path, whether that involves anything like the God of monotheism or not. And in the words of a famous Irish blessing, may the wind be always at your back, and the rains fall softly on your fields, and may God hold you gently in the palm of God's hand in case you believe in God. And may you be in heaven a full half hour before the devil knows you're dead, and so you may as well not believe in the devil in the first place. That's it. What you're going to do.